What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another video, and today I have my 3 of the Fallen of the Virtuous, or Animation Chronicles structure decks put together into what we have here. And to be honest, I've been testing it quite frequently off camera since I opened these. And this is probably the most fun I've had while playing Branded since making the almost 60 card Branded Chimera list. And this thing does the exact same end board with minor tweaks here and there, very consistently. And if I was to give this deck a rating, I would say it's a pretty good locals level deck. Definitely not something I would be taking to a regional with just 3 of the structure decks. I would definitely want to add in some upgrades here and there, or go ahead and just bite the bullet and play Draco Tail Branded, because that's a better deck than this. But I'm going to be bringing you what I believe is the best iteration of what I can provide for a deck list for 3 of these structure decks thrown together. And we're starting off with 2 copies of the boy Albaz. Pretty standard for most branded lists where you only play 2 Albaz. Even in Draco Tail lists, they're only playing 2, sometimes even 1. So it's just the bog standard for branded. Next, we're playing 3 copies of Aluber, the Jester of Despia, or Aluber, the Boober of Duber. If you don't know, on normal or special, he can search for a branded spell trap. And that's mostly what we're using him for, is a normal summon in the deck, because we don't need our normal summon, but it's nice to have one. And plus he gets us to Branded Fusion, and Branded Fusion is our whole shtick. One card I am iffy on, specifically at the number I'm running, is 3 Albion the Shrouded Dragon. I typically only ever run 1, just because if I open with all of my good light targets to use for Branded Fusion, I usually just skip going into Albion, specifically the extra deck Albion, and use this Albion from the deck as a dark material to make Lubellion. However, it's hard to find cards to fill out this deck. This is a 41 card list, so you could always cut one of this and go down to 2. There is another card in here that I am running at 2 that you could bump up to 3 and then also cut the Albion, so you can play what I would believe is the better 1 Albion the Shrouded Dragon. But he has come up in testing one time by having him at multiples, or having him at more than 2 or more than 1. So, you know, again, take that with a grain of salt. But I believe this is the best list that I can come up with, and 3 Albion is part of that list. Just like how only 2 copies of Blazing Cartesia. This is the other one that I'm like debating on moving up to 3, because you can move Cartesia up to 3 and Albion down to 2 and keep it at 41, or cut an Albion for a Cartesia and then cut another one and go down to 1 Albion and play 40. But in my experience with playing Branded, the further above 40 you get, the better the deck feels. I don't know if that makes sense, but this deck has a lot of soft garnets and even a couple of hard garnets, and you want to avoid drawing those as much as possible. Starting off with one of our soft garnets is one of Springen's Kit. You only ever really see people running one of this. It's not even a mandatory card, but it is searchable within the deck, and it recycles your Branded Fusion to be able to continue making plays. It's also a dark monster to be able to make Lubellion from the deck if you don't need it. Then we're on 1 copy of Guiding Quem the Virtuous. I've never actually gotten the chance to play with Quem in other branded lists that I've made, but she is pretty good. You do kind of need the level 12 Synchro to make full use of her, but regardless, she is still a good card to be playing because she is recursion from the graveyard. Then we have 1 copy of Tri-Brigade Mercurier. Mercurier is amazing. I've thought about going up to 2 copies of him, but I've also realized that you can use this in tandem with Bestials that you get within the structure deck to be able to resource loop and constantly get this 1 copy back into the deck. So really good as a one of, but again, if you want to go up to 2, Albion is like the first place you start with cuts. And then our last monster for the branded portion is 1 copy of Despian Tragedy. This card, the only time I have ever actually used it is with a copy, or with, spoiler alert, Gold Sark to search a Luber. But you can also use it for other things. It is a dark monster, so you can use it to make Lubellion as well, or off of Branded Fusion, and then search the Aluber to be able to grab something else instead of Branded Fusion. But for the most part, your other monsters are just better off than the Tragedy. But Tragedy is still a card worth running because it does search your normal summon in the deck. Now moving on to the spells and trap. We are on 2 copies of Branded Fusion. Obviously, you can't play Branded without Branded Fusion, and I wish they would give us the 3rd copy back. Come on, Konami. Branded's not doing anything except as like a 5-card engine in Draco Tail. Yeah, we all know Branded Fusion. Solid card. You want to see it as much as possible. So that's why we run as many ways to see it as possible. Next, we have 3 of the new, the Fallen and the Virtuous. This card is absolutely insane. It's removal, and it's also a yoink from your opponent's graveyard if you have an Ecclesia monster on your side of the field. Spoiler alert, I am running an Ecclesia. Then we have 3 copies of Branded Opening. It is 3 more copies of Aluber, which is 3 more copies of Branded Fusion. So that brings us up from 5 copies to 8 copies. And now we move into a bunch of one-ofs. We have 1 copy of Branded Lost. Brandon is lost in this card. This card is absolutely insane. Again, something we all know what it does, but if you don't, it just prevents your opponent from responding to your fusion summon effects. And whenever you fusion summon a monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz, you can add either Fallen of Albaz or a monster that mentions it from your deck to your hand, like the Mercurier. Mercurier mentions Fallen of Albaz in its text. This card just cares if it's Albaz mentioned type shit. And you can add it from your deck to your hand. So this card gets you a free monster negate, which is pretty sick. Then we're running 1 copy of Brandon in white because Brandon is wearing white now. We don't know why Brandon does these things. It's just an extra fusion spell that you can play. It's another search target for a Luber. Then I am also playing 1 Brandon in High Spirits. This is a card that you can send off of Albion, and then in the end phase, get it back to your hand. And if you want to choose to continue playing from that point and send another fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard, this is a good way to do it. And then 1 copy of Branded in red. This is a card I've thought about cutting and just taking the deck to 40, just because I never end with a Despia monster in my graveyard. But I've also never drawn this card, and I don't search this card. It's one of those follow-up cards where you use it as a follow-up to the beginning of another turn to hopefully push for game. But even at that, you don't need it. So if you want to cut Brandon in red, this is another card I would recommend cutting before anything else to add in maybe another Blazing Cartesia, maybe another Mercurier. But it feels fine having the ratios where they are. The deck is very consistent. I have in probably 20 or 30 test hands not opened a single hand that is unplayable, which is really nice. Then I have the 1 copy of Branded Retribution. Obviously, counter trap, so it's really hard for your opponent to interact with it, and it's interaction as well as a way to recur your Branded Fusion, and that is it for the branded portion of the branded deck. Now we move on to the Bestial portion, starting off with 3 copies of the Bestial Lubellion. Really solid card. This is my main light target that I use. The main combo is summoning Albion and then using Albion to banish the Aluber and Fallen of Albaz, and then make Lubellion put back itself and the Albaz, and then the Albion on board is free tribute for the Bestial Lubellion, which then gets me a free branded continuous spell trap like Branded Lost. Then for its hand effect, which lets you discard it to add a Bestial monster from your deck to your hand except itself, we're on the 1 Magnemite, the 1 Druis Worm, and I'm also playing 1 copy of Saronir. These are hand traps as well in both literally and metaphorically. These are also extenders for the deck. They're also extra dark targets that you can use off of Branded Fusion. And they're also level 6 Dark Dragons that you contribute with the Bestial Lubellion, get bonus effects like Druis Worm being able to send something, and so on and so forth. Magnemite being able to just grab another dragon in the end phase, like your Albion the Shrouded Dragon, or whatever you want. And then we're also on 1 copy of Branded Regained and Branded Beast. I originally was side decking the Branded Beast, but decided to take something out and move it to the side deck in favor of playing the Branded Beast, because there are times where I'll open the Regained and don't need to put Branded Lost, even though you can always have a need for Branded Lost. So I was like, we'll play another target for the Bestial Lubellion to place face up. Plus, it's a pop for tributing your Bestial Lubellion in order to use it to sack your Druis Worm and get a free body removed from your opponent's side of the field on your follow-up turn. Next, I am playing a very small Dogmatica package in here. We're on 1 copy of Ecclesia. As much as I do and don't like the anime style alt arts, I mean, it's what comes in the structure deck. So if you were to pick up 3 of these, you could build this exact list with everything exactly as is right from go. Then we're on 1 copy of Fleur de Lis as your search target for Ecclesia. And then we're on 3 copies of Nadir Servant, because Nadir Servant serves a dual purpose of getting us into an additional hand trap. Fleur de Lis is a infinite impermanence on legs that doesn't target. So, a solid card. Also, Ecclesia is, in theory, big enough to be a problem for specifically Yummy. Pure Yummy to get over, because a lot of where their damage comes from is the extra deck, and obviously she can't die to cards from the extra deck. And then Nadir Servant, again, serves a dual purpose because our extra deck monsters like to be in the graveyard, so putting any of them in the graveyard is just extra card advantage in your end phase, and you're usually ending the turn with Nadir Servant. You're not starting the turn with Nadir Servant. So yeah, because it's for the rest of the turn after it resolves, instead of the turn you activate this, you can't summon from the extra deck. So since it's from the point of it resolving, it means that your opponent, you can go through your whole combo and then still activate this, which is really, really nice. And again, gets you a monster that can't be killed by extra deck monsters and an infinite impermanence that doesn't target the monster, and puts a 2500 body that can get bigger on your side of the field. So that's why I'm running the small Dogmatica package. It is, again, it's 5 cards. And then lastly, we are on, like I said, the earlier spoiler was a copy of Gold Sark, and then I'm also on 1 copy of Fusion Deployment. So if you open the Fusion Deployment, specifically going second, you can Fusion Deployment into Albaz and try to Super Poly off something your opponent controls. But you can definitely run the other copies of it in the main deck Again, Albion and Branded in Red, or Albion the Shrouded Dragon and Branded in Red are where I would start when taking cards out and putting cards in. But again, this is where I have gotten to for the main deck. So from again a lot of testing, not a lot of testing against opponents, but I do look at my hands and I think, okay, what hand traps would completely stop this hand? And most of the time, it's literally just Ash. We don't really care about Fua. Fua can be a problem, and Nib could also be an issue, but we also don't really summon that much. We do summon 5 times if you do decide to go the Lubellion portion of the combo, and not having cross out available in the structure deck does kind of suck, because I would recommend playing cross out with a copy or 2 of Nib. Plus, Nib is a light target that you can use. But we're going to move on into the extra deck real quick, and we're going to start off with 2 copies of the all new The Dragon That Devours the Dogma. Absolutely cracked card. Gains 500 attack if you control an Ecclesia monster on your board or in your graveyard, and becomes unaffected by other cards' effects. But during the end phase, if it's in your graveyard because it was sent there this turn, you can add from your deck to your hand a Fallen of Albaz or a Dogmatica or Tri-Brigade card. And obviously the Fallen and the Virtuous counts as a branded card. Well, it always counts as a branded and Dogmatica card. So, pretty sick card. Again, a 3k body to also help with pushing for game. Really, really solid. Then we've got 2 copies of Albion the Shrouded Dragon. You can't go wrong with Albion the Shrouded Dragon and playing more than 1 copy of him. I do see a lot of branded Draco Tail lists running 2 copies of Albion, and some other non-Draco Tail lists running 2 copies of Albion, just so they can get away with running the Fallen of the Virtuous, because that card is absolutely insane, because it is settable from the deck by Albion, but also searchable from the deck by the Dragon That Devours the Dogma. So you can use it as a board breaker and then simultaneously use it as an interaction piece. And both of these cards facilitate that. So which is why I've been seeing a lot of decks using at least 2 copies of Albion and 1 copy of the Dragon That Devours the Dogma, because you typically... Hello, phone. Thank you. You typically are going to use Albion to set it during your end phase, to use it on your opponent's turn, and then when you use it on your opponent's turn, you're adding it from your deck to your hand by sending the Dragon That Devours the Dogma. Then we've got 2 copies of Mirror Jade. Can't not play 2 Mirror Jade in this deck, because you have plenty of ways to facilitate 2 of it. 1 copy of Lubellion, because he always puts himself back, and if he doesn't put himself back, then you're obviously trying to push for a game, but he's only 2,500, so that's that. 1 copy of Bringrind, because this is another way to search your Mercurier. 1 copy of Sprind, because this searches your Springin's kit. 1 copy of Albalenitus, because it searches a Polymerization normal spell or a Fusion normal spell, so it searches branded Fusion. Then I'm on 1 copy of Granguignol, 2 copies of Bearbrum, and 2 copies of Titaniclad. Titaniclad also facilitates your branded engine. You can, if you're trying to break boards with Mirror Jade, send the Titaniclad, banish something your opponent controls, and then in your end phase, Titaniclad will summon the Ecclesia, or you can also summon your Guiding Quem from the deck. If you summon Ecclesia, you get to add Fleur-de-Lis, and Fleur-de-Lis is a free monster negate on your turn or your opponent's turn. Again, non-targeting, and that is what I'm running for the extra deck. Again, you can change some ratios around if you really want to, but this to me feels like the perfect and most flexible extra deck that you can build with, again, what's available in the um, structure decks. Now, starting us off in the side deck, we have 3 copies of Nibiru for when we are forced to go second. I was playing Nibiru in the main deck because, well, it's the only true hand trap that we have that isn't limited. Rest in peace, Druis Worm and Magnemite. To be honest, I would rather see Druis Worm go to 0 and us get 2 more Magnemite back, but as long as one of them exists, the other one must remain at 1. And unfortunately, if Magnemite was to ever go, Druis Worm would have to stay at 1 because it is way too good of a card. It's a 2-for-1 on a body that's actually kind of big. So yeah. Then we have 2 copies of Saronir. Again, if we're made to go second, it's a free body that we can put on the board, and it's a graveyard disruption, and it gets really good into Yummy. Then we're on 3 copies of Triple Tactics Thrust because we get 3 copies of Thrust in this. So if you do open up with the Aluber and your opponent ashes you, Thrust lets you grab your Branded Fusion from your deck to your hand, and then you can just Branded Fusion anyways. Then we're on 3 copies of Super Poly because a lot of the cards in our extra deck can be generically made as long as we gain access to Fallen of Albaz. So we can play Super Poly kind of well, but not the greatest. Then we're on the other 2 copies of Fusion Deployment. Again, you could probably slot these in over some other cards and then fill out the side deck with some other stuff, but there's not a whole lot to fill the side deck in with unless you want to play 3 copies of Blackout Laughs or 3 copies of Fusion Duplication, but I'm only on 1 each because they are grabbable off of Triple Tactics Thrust. And even if you're going first, you can always side these in as with the 3 copies of Thrust over some of the other cards that I've talked about, and set these off of Thrust instead of setting something like Branded Fusion or whatever. And yeah, I'm going to pause my recording, reorganize all of this, and I shall return to do my outro in just a moment. And on that note, I will be wrapping up this video here. I want to say thank you to the people that have stuck around on this long hiatus I've been on. Again, I haven't forgotten about my YouTube channel. I remember it every day, and I go, oh shit, I haven't uploaded in almost a week, or oh shit, I haven't uploaded in a month, or oh shit, I haven't uploaded in almost 2 months. Again, just broke. There's a lot of decks I want to be building, and unfortunately, a lot of the decks that I don't want to build are going to cost me a lot of money. A lot. Like, I'm looking at wanting to pick up some stuff for Canine, so maybe I can build a Canine Vanquish Soul. And, yeah, Noroi, the one from Dude, that one, that's $30 a copy. I thought it was bad that Izuna was expensive, but now she's gotten cheap. Or Draco Tail. Arthalion just shot up to $10 a copy. Ain't that some shit, huh? But yeah, other than me griping about card prices being too expensive for individual cards, and then not to mention sealed product. Oh my god. Nothing like buying a box of Maze of the Master for $30 a box, or, you know, $30 boxes of any set. That's wild. But yeah, anyways, guys, I will see you guys whenever I have the money and time to make another video. Peace.